under fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again.
Hey, good evening, guys, and welcome to another edition of Stateside Footy post-October window edition. And goddamn it, we have a lot to get into tonight, so let's go ahead and do it. But before we do, man, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons, and make sure you hit those notification bells, because obviously we have a lot of cool stuff coming up this weekend on Stateside Footy, and you want to make sure that you hit those notification bells so you don't miss out, my guys. All right, so tonight, man, we're playing a little stock up, stock down as we take a recap of the players that were involved during the October window. There has been some movement when it comes to the depth chart. And listen, man, a lot of good performances this weekend. And from that standpoint, man, let's get into it, and let's get into the striker pool, because there was two specifically that were on the roster that one generally stayed the same, and one skyrocketed up with a couple arrows moving down. And of course, Flo Balogun, we're going to start right here because his stock didn't necessarily move, as he currently is the striker one when the World Cup starts, barring any type of injury. Even with a dip of form, potentially, he is going to be your striker one. But striker two is going to be kind of interesting, because I have it at 1A, 1B. And I still believe that Ricardo Pepi is going to be a part of this World Cup roster, if healthy. And Lord willing, the form is there. He's probably going to be a part of it. But Haji Wright, man. Haji Wright has to be talked about, because that performance essentially came out of nowhere. And what do I mean by that? It's, you're talking about a player that was kind of like on the fringe of the plans of Mauricio Pochettino. And of course, you come in and you're given an opportunity. And I understand. I totally get it. It's Australia. But it's an Australia team that had won 7 in a row. It's an Australia team that really tried to kind of punk and bully the U.S. And of course, it didn't necessarily work out too well for them. But that being said, right after Australia took a 1-0 lead, and we're kind of trying to figure out exactly if this team was going to sink or if it was going to swim, all of a sudden, Christian Roldan threads a nice little through pass right there to Haji Wright, and all of a sudden, we've equalized in the second half, right after the whistle. And it was, quick thinking by Christian Roldan as he played one forward, and Haji Wright, literally had to, go to work right there, as he essentially, broke down a defender right there and made the defender sit, and he puts a beautiful ball up into the corner right there. Haji Wright, gets 2 goals, literally carries the national team, and with those type of performances, those are the type of performances right there that skyrocket you up the depth chart. And I probably have Haji Wright as the 1B, as the number 2. As for the remaining strikers, Patrick Agyemang has not moved anything. Agyemang was a part of this striker crew in the October window, and he didn't see the field. As a matter of fact, when they brought Haji on, they brought Ballo back on. And so from that standpoint, Agyemang is kind of where he's at this stage. And again, it just goes to show you what a real striker actually means to this U.S. men's national team. When Ballo came back in the September window because Brian White wasn't available, and all of a sudden he has the window that he has, it kind of reinforces you just exactly what the striker position means to the U.S. men's national team. It's always been a position that actually has had meaning, and this team is not going to be able to function without one. And I think we've actually seen the top end of what Patrick Agyemang is going to give the U.S. And of course, in this window, being, I guess you can say, a lot of people assume that he's kind of Potch's guy. Well, Potch's guy didn't even see the pitch. But that being said, Ballo still obviously striker 1. Haji Wright is striker 2-ish, right along with Ricardo Pepi. And again, Pepi is going to have a role with this team. I think I probably have Sargent right underneath that level right there with Agyemang and Downs. And again, not to take anything away from Agyemang and Downs, but that being said, man, it's a long uphill to go for all 3 of those guys. And I think with the performance and the immersion of Haji Wright, it almost, in effect, kind of drops Josh Sargent down a little bit. And again, club form is nice, but when you get the opportunities to come into the national team and you don't take advantage of it, just like Josh, that definitely plays a role into who is going to be a part of this, this World Cup team. And I still think that maybe Josh finds his way on a window one more time. But that being said, how many bites of the apple has he had, and how many times has he essentially has let down his coaching staff? So as of right now, it's only 3, and I think there is a big gap between 3 and 4. Turning to the forwards, obviously Christian Pulisic and Malik Tillman have their tickets punched on this World Cup team. I think if everything were equal, injury, form, whatever the case may be, those guys are going to be there. Now, the interesting thing is there were a few performances here that I think are worth mentioning. Number 1, Weston McKennie, as he was kind of pushed into a role higher up the pitch, and it looked like against Ecuador there was some discomfort with it. I didn't think his performance necessarily stood out. Now against Australia, it looked a little better, but again, against a team like Australia, you were kind of expecting a guy like Weston McKennie to kind of stand out a little bit more. Didn't necessarily think he did that, but his stock definitely climbed because he was productive at times. And I think when you're looking at this forward group, when you're kind of thinking behind Pulisic and Tillman, guys that are going to be able to come off the bench and make an impact, specifically, I guess you would say that's going to be opponent determined. Weston McKennie's stock definitely rised in this window. The other guy that actually stock, believe it or not, whose stock actually rised was Brendan Aronson. And when Brendan came on the pitch against Australia, and especially when they brought Arston onto the pitch a little bit later, and Aronson had to move up to a higher up the pitch, all of a sudden he became dangerous as well too, as he was the one that actually threaded that beautiful pass to Diego Luna, who couldn't cash in at that point. But that being said, Brendan Aronson shows you exactly what he's able to give to the national team. And again, what I like about Brendan Aronson is the fact that he's already carved himself out a nice little starting spot with Leeds in the Premier League. And so it's kind of iron sharpening iron. And so it was only going to be natural that the next time that we were going to see Brendan Aronson with the national team, he was going to do something. And sure enough, he did. And again, these are these small pockets of good play also reinforce trust for a guy like Mauricio Pochettino. And so from that standpoint, both Weston McKennie and Brendan Aronson stock went up. The interesting thing, though, is I still think Alex Indehas' stock is still up as well, even though he couldn't play. And it's going to be interesting to see now all of a sudden, when you kind of look at these forwards and you're looking at some of these moving parts, now a position that at one point you were kind of wondering how far the depth goes, and now all of a sudden you're looking at 5-6 guys now potentially in these forward positions that when you're kind of looking down the bench and wondering if there's going to be somebody that you can bring in a clutch World Cup moment, whether or not they're going to be able to hold their own against a very good opponent. Now all of a sudden, I don't think there's going to be a lot of worry. I don't think Diego Luna's stock either went up or went down. Now, granted, I don't like seeing players get on the pitch against an opponent like Australia and not be able to finish. And that was the problem with Diego Luna. That's the biggest problem that I have with this performance against Australia, was the fact that he put himself into two very good positions. On the one hand, you can credit him with his movement and his ability to get into dangerous positions to actually be able to put the ball in the back of the net. But it's the finishing that kind of erases the work that he did to get to that point. And so from that standpoint, it's one thing against Ecuador, but it's another thing against Australia. And let's understand something really quick. Australia is Australia. Good team, good players, good team. I'm not taking anything away from them. But that being said, it's like you should be able to score from those positions. And so I guess you can say that Luna's stock kind of dipped a little bit. But that being said, when all things are considered and you look at the opportunities that he's been given by Mauricio Pochettino, you probably are expecting Luna to be around. But then again, it's like, I always ask this question when it comes to Luna. It's like, when is enough going to be enough? Because as much as I like Diego, it just seems like the last couple windows, it's kind of like been somewhat disappointing, leading to other somewhat disappointing opportunities. And it feels like I guess you can say the momentum that he gave himself from the January camp through the March camp through the Gold Cup, ever since really that Mexico match in the Gold Cup in the final, these performances really haven't really been all that great. So I guess the question naturally, and I want to know what you guys feel about Diego in the chat. Number one, is he actually on this level where he can actually give something to the national team? Or is this just like maybe a step a little too high? That's kind of the question right there, because there is some warning bells with a guy like Diego Luna. But that being said, I think Zendejas is fine, and I would probably assume with the performances of both Weston McKennie and Brendan Aronson, I would probably assume that come November window, those three guys are going to be on the roster for that one as well too. So that's going to be kind of interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the defensive midfielders, because Tyler Adams was not in this camp, allegedly wife giving birth to their second kid, and congratulations on that one to the Tyler Adams family on the new baby. That's awesome. So in that void stepped Tanner Tessman back in with the national team, and Tessman, his stock absolutely shot through the roof. That performance against Ecuador, it was kind of a defining moment for Tanner Tessman, who was out of the national team picture for quite some time. And you were kind of wondering when that opportunity was going to come, because the performances at the club weren't matching what Mauricio Pochettino has been telling us about. If you were playing well with the club, you're going to get a look with the national team. Well, he finally got one, and actually stamped it to the point where it left me kind of wondering, is he a starter, right? Because if they're playing three in the back, playing with 2 6s and 2 10s, right, is he going to be one of the 2 6s that are going to be starting game one for the World Cup, right alongside Tyler Adams? And that's the kind of performance where you kind of have to take a step back and actually ask yourself, did he just kind of put himself in a position where now all of a sudden you're wondering whether or not he's going to be a starter? It was that good a performance, and I thought he was fine against Australia as well too when he came on. That was a professional performance right there, to the point where it's like it blew my mind. It was a great performance, to the point where I now actually have Tanner Tessman's name potentially written into my starting lineup game one for the World Cup. It was that kind of stock where it moves that quick. It fluctuates that quick, right? So from that standpoint, Tanner Tessman was awesome. The other guy we have to talk about, believe it or not, is Christian Roldan. And Christian Roldan came off the bench late against Ecuador. Was fine, wasn't outstanding in any way, shape, or form. But then the match against Australia happens, and he's in the starting 11. And it didn't necessarily start really all that well for Christian Roldan. But that being said, as soon as that first half kind of got into it and things kind of settled, then all of a sudden Christian Roldan kind of turned on the I guess you can say the eyes and vibes, because he under pressure he threaded just a silky through ball that led to Haji Wright's first goal. And then he also put 2 shots on net. And both of them were near miss. The first one was like literally 3 inches outside the post, and he nearly buried one. The second one went a little high, but that being said, he started to put himself in positions in dangerous goal scoring positions, and the finishing just necessarily wasn't there. But then again, in the second half, off the quick restart, he was the one that had the high IQ. That played that ball down the pitch for Haji Wright to play onto. And of course, Haji's ability to finish made the match 2-1, but Christian Roldan finishes with 2 assists and damn near scored a goal as well too. And again, it's like when you saw the September performance against Japan, and now you saw this performance against Australia, obviously he's going to be a part of the November window. He's just going to be there. And now you ask yourself is whether or not he's going to be a part of that World Cup squad. Because I think when you start hearing everything that's leaking out of the U.S. camp, Pochettino gushes about a guy like Christian Roldan. And when he actually has the validation of his coach and he actually backs it up with that type of performance, now all of a sudden, Christian Roldan is probably going to be a part of things moving forward. And I think it just shows the respect of a guy like Christian Roldan, kind of shattering the whole anti-MLS narrative that is going around with the U.S. men's national team fans, that don't believe that he should be a part of it. James Sands, I don't think his stock moved up or down. I think it was good to see James Sands back with the national team. He was given a massive opportunity to start. And I don't think his performance really was great. I don't think it was terrible. I think it was just, I think it was a good performance, but I don't think he did enough to really set himself out like Tessman and Roldan, which is actually kind of a bummer, because I thought James had played well leading into this camp, and I was kind of hoping that James Sands would actually kind of make his mark. And again, it was what it was. It was a good performance, not great, and I don't think he did enough to separate himself from the performances of Tanner Tessman and or Christian Roldan. But it was good to see James Sands. But the question is was his performance good enough to get another call in? Because you probably would expect that the 3 names that I mentioned right above them most definitely will get called into the November camp. But I think there's going to be 4 CDMs in the mix. So the question is who had the better performance? Was it James Sands or was it Aiden Morris? That's really the question, right? Because again, I thought Aiden at times didn't look great against Ecuador. But that being said, he also played well as well. There were times where he had pockets of very good play. And so from that standpoint, it seems like James Sands and Aiden Morris are kind of in the same boat when it comes to stock up, stock down. I think those guys, were a push really when it comes to it. Good performances, but didn't do enough to kind of push themselves up the pecking order when it comes to the CDM depth chart. But that being said, it's like two of these guys had very good performances, and performances to the point where one of them is damn near a starter and the other one is going to be a part of that rotation, whether anybody likes it or not. I hate to say it. Turning to the center backs, Riemann Richards will be a part of the World Cup squad without a doubt. Even though Richards, this window was odd for Chris Richards because he got caught out in that first one against Ener Valencia. And then in the second one, he gets nutmegged against an Australia side. gets caught ball watching on that first goal from Australia. And then all of a sudden, when Australia thought that they were kind of getting into position where momentum was carrying them to the point where they thought they could punk the U.S., Chris Richards was the first guy to stand up and not allow that shit to happen. And then all of a sudden, he started playing well. And it was weird because I don't think this was the best window at all for Chris Richards. As a matter of fact, if we're talking stock up, stock down, I think his stock went down a little bit more than anything. But that being said, it's like, does the leadership kind of reverse it? Because as soon as that happened, he started playing way better. But Tim Ream didn't play in the second game. And you wonder whether or not the Enner Valencia goal kind of shattered the illusion of what Tim Ream is able to do, because I actually thought that, the start that Mark McKenzie got, I actually think it was a pretty solid start. Now, granted, that first 30 minutes of the first half against Australia was terrible. Him and Weah, it wasn't really all that great, but I thought he actually played a little bit better as that game progressed. The guy that's nobody talking about in the center back group that I thought actually had two very strong games was Miles Robinson, and I'll be the first one to admit it. Respect is respect, and I thought that he held his own quite well, playing on the right side of a back three. He didn't look out of place. He looked actually pretty strong in a lot of different areas, to the point where now he's kind of leapfrogged Cameron Carter-Vickers and Austin Trusty. And the question is like, did Miles Robinson do enough to even leapfrog a guy like Mark McKenzie? Because I would probably assume that come November window against Paraguay or Uruguay, would it shock anybody if Miles Robinson started in a back three with Tim Ream and Chris Richards? Probably not. Probably not. Again, for the praise that I heap upon Tanner Tessman and Haji Wright, two guys that very much took advantage of their opportunity in this window. I think I can put Miles Robinson in that class as well too, to the point where it's like I wouldn't be surprised if he was called back in the November window and actually started again as well too. It almost kind of feels like that, right? So Cameron Carter-Vickers gets called in, doesn't find his way onto the pitch. Miles Robinson comes in without being a part of the national team picture for quite some time, and he gets two straight starts. Kind of tells you something. And I thought his performance was fine. I think he paid off Mauricio Pochettino's confidence. So from the center back group, two good performances, stocks that went up, one that kind of went down a little bit, but I don't think Chris Richards' stock went down to the point where he's not going to get time. I think this is an opportunity for Chris Richards to kind of take a look at himself real quick and just admit that, yeah, his window wasn't the best. The wingback situation. Jedi and Dest, obviously number one, number two. That's not going to change anything. To be honest with you, I don't know if Freeman or Arston were that great. If I'm being perfectly honest, I thought when they did play, I thought they were fine. But that being said, it's Arston didn't have the type of performance against Ecuador that he had against Japan, which I guess kind of goes to show you the different levels between those two national teams. And of course, Japan was rotated, so obviously that helped. But this was an opportunity for, at least in my mind, for Max Arston to really kind of galvanize himself a little bit, so I can actually look at it with my own eyes against a competent national team and say, like, yeah, he kind of belongs. And I didn't necessarily get that from Max Arston. From Freeman, on the other hand, I thought he was better. But how much better? I don't know. Because the other guy, Tim Weah, who we saw on the right and the left, I thought he was far better on the right than he was on the left. And the interesting thing is, it feels like Tim Weah is kind of developing into that kind of jack of all trades for the national team now. I think he was cozy when they were playing with an attacking three, and he was that high, right-sided winger. I think it was obvious that he had a place there. But now all of a sudden things have changed, and now we're going to a back three with wing backs. The idea that he's going to be an automatic starter now, I don't necessarily think that's written in stone anymore. But I do think that he is going to be the first off the bench if one of those guys can't go. If Des can't go, I think I think he showed enough where he's probably now going to vault ahead of either Max Armstead or Freeman when it comes to the backup position for either side. I think that's the I don't necessarily want to pigeonhole him by saying that's going to be his role, but that being said, it's like when I think about the two underneath forward positions, I don't think that he's done enough to say that he should replace Tillman or Pulisic. Definitely not. And I don't think that if everything is equal and both Jedi and Dest are healthy and they're informed, that he actually even replaces those guys. So he's like, as of right now, he's kind of like first off the bench in case of emergency, break glass. He's going to be that guy. But that being said, he can also play forward as well too. So he's going to be like, it almost feels like now that the dust is settled and that we know that this is going to be the formation moving forward. I just don't know if Tim Weah is going to find himself in the starting 11. Sad but true. Turning to the goalkeepers as we finish this stock up and stock down. Matt Freese starts both matches. I thought Matt Freese was fine. That maybe, like if there's any critique from Matt Freese, it was that goal by Enter Valencia. Maybe if you want to be a dick about it, maybe you talk about his positioning on that goal. Although me personally, I just think that ball was put in the right area. I didn't think he was going to save it, even if his positioning was on point. Second goal, again, good positioning, bad defense in front of them. So there is also that. But that being said, with these two starts, without a doubt, he solidified himself as the number one for the U.S. Without a doubt. I still thought there could be a possibility that Matt Turner could play his way back in. And who knows, maybe that happens because after the November window, we don't see a U.S. camp until Camp Cupcake. And at that point, you would probably assume that Matt Turner is going to be called in for Camp Cupcake, and he's probably going to be given another opportunity in January. And if Matt Turner does well in Camp Cupcake and shows that he's kind of learned from the mistakes that kind of, that lost him his starting position to begin with in the first place, then all of a sudden we got ourselves a two-horse race again at goalkeeper. But as of right now, I think it's fair to say that Matt Turner is the clear-cut. Not Matt Turner, excuse me. Matt Freese is the clear-cut number one right now. And that stock is so high that a big part of me thinks that Matt Turner just is not going to be able to close the gap. But stranger things have happened. Injuries can happen from between now and the start of the World Cup. And who knows, maybe Matt Turner might find himself the starter by proxy because of injury or form. I don't think that necessarily happens with a guy like Matt Freese. So as of right now, stock up for Matt Freese. And I don't think Matt Turner's stock went up or down. I think it is exactly where it's at. I think he's just right. As of right now, is the experienced number two. That's it. And I think that's his role. All right. So to recap a little bit, massive stock up went to Haji Wright for obvious reasons. And by proxy, because Haji Wright's stock went through the roof this window, stock down actually to Josh Sargent. And I think that gap between 3 and 4 is massive. Stock down for Patrick Aubameyang as well too, because unfortunately, and it sucks, but because of the emergence of Ballo as number one and Haji potentially playing himself into number 2, Ricardo Pepi is still going to be a part of this World Cup squad because the talent and the form when he's on is too enticing not to be able to take him. And I think it's because Josh Sargent's inability to score with the national team, and he's given so many opportunities that he couldn't take advantage of it. And now all of a sudden, because of that, there is a massive gap between 3 and 4. And, unfortunately, Aubameyang and Damian Downs is going to be a part of that. In the forward position, Weston McKennie and Brendan Aronson, their stock went up. And it's hard to ignore both of those guys. And I think the interesting thing was, and I said this on Twitter, and I said this on previous shows, that Weston McKennie's Weston McKennie was hanging by a thread with this national team, and he needed a camp to re-solidify himself and at least remind Mauricio Pochettino of why he was trusted before previous. And I think he did that. And again, his play wasn't great. Like I like, listen, man, respect. I always give respect. Respect is given. And so from that baseline, I will give McKennie his flowers. But that being said, I don't think his play was all that spectacular where you can point to and be like, fuck yes, that's the guy. That's the guy. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was great. I actually thought, in the time frame that we saw Brendan Aronson, I thought Brendan Aronson was far more goal dangerous than Weston McKennie was in the minutes that he played. And Brendan, and because Brendan has taken the steps with his club team to carve out a nice little role for himself with lead starting 11. And now you're starting to kind of see that fruit kind of pay that fruits of that grind start to play, to start to pay off for him with the national team. And he nearly had an assist, and it was Diego Luna that couldn't finish, right? So I think Brendan Aronson, I think that's the thing. What Brendan Aronson showed was that he can be trusted if you're chasing goals late. He's his skill set is very noticeable. Diego Luna, by the way, again, and I want to know this from you guys in the chat right now, whether or not Diego Luna has played, like has gotten the last of his automatic call-ups, because it's one thing to do it in Camp Cupcake and it's another thing to do it in the Gold Cup, but really since Mexico and Turkey and Switzerland as well too. Let's keep it real. There is a level in which he is absolutely great. And then there's a level that I feel like it might be a little bit too much for him right now. And we also have the emergence of Alex Zendejas as well too. And I think Zendejas can elevate to something a little bit higher than a guy like Diego Luna. But that being said, the for me, the biggest question within this window was Diego Luna and whether or not that needs to be reevaluated. He's got the characteristics that Pochettino loves, right? That's why he keeps getting called in. But I like when you see his performance against Ecuador and you see the performance against Australia and you saw the performance in the last window against South Korea and Japan, and you saw the performance against Mexico and Switzerland and Turkey. Me personally, I think maybe right now the national team is like, especially against legit national teams, I think it might be a step too high. Like this feels like Diego Luna is like a 2030 guy if he makes the move to Europe. And he's actually, and he actually is taking that steps to kind of get to that level. I just think that it might be just a tick too high for Diego. But that being said, it's like you wonder whether or not he's going to be a part of the November camp. And I think he might be. The CDMs, again, just to go over it, Adams, obviously, stock went up just because obviously his wife had the second kid, and that's always good. Listen, man, I'm all about family, so that made me happy. So again, congratulations to Tyler Adams and his wife on their birth of the second child. But Tanner Tessman, that along with Haji Wright were the two biggest stock ups of this window, and to the point where like the play was so good, you're starting to wonder about whether or not Tanner Tessman played himself into a starting role come the first match of the World Cup alongside Tyler Adams in that midfield pivot, because that performance to me highlighted everything that I've been talking about with Tanner Tessman now for the last couple of months. For those that watch the Yanks abroad, the evolution of Tanner Tessman to get to this point, from Venezia making the move to France, and then that adjustment period until he got his 2 feet on the ground, and then all of a sudden it seems like he's taken advantage of everything. And I think that kind of manifested with the national team to the point where it's like, God damn, that was beautiful. Good performances in both games. And of course, Christian Roldan. You got to talk about him because he actually had himself a great performance, man. 2 assists and nearly scored a goal against Australia. And for me, there's a lot of respect with this, right? Because it's one thing when your coach is trying to sell you to the media, and he's talking about your leadership, and he's talking about the valuable intangibles that you bring to your team as you highlight everything that he's done with Seattle. And then he comes into a national team camp, and then he does that to validate everything. To me, like when it comes to athletes, man, I love it when this happens, because I think for me, number one, it shuts everybody up. That's the one thing that I was hoping was going to happen. But the other thing, I think it solidified itself moving forward to the point where it's like I can envision Christian Roldan being on the World Cup roster. And again, if he continues to have these type of performances, I think that's going to happen. James Sands and Aiden Morris, I don't think either did themselves any injustices in this window. I just don't think that they actually had those type of performances to that on the level of a guy like Tanner Tessman or Christian Roldan. Now, do I think that either have earned themselves back into the national team camp for November? I think they're going to take 4 CDMs anyway. So the question is who had the better window? Was it James Sands or was it Aiden Morris? Take your pick. I think both played well enough where potentially you can make the argument that either one can come back in, but I don't think both will be on the November roster. Center backs, stock down to Chris Richards, because I actually, like, if we're being honest, I don't think his play was really all that great. Let a bad goal against Ecuador. And again, that goal that Australia scored never should have happened. And it looked like he got nutmegged, and looks like he got caught ball watching as well too. Tim Ream played one, left out the second one, and I think Tim Ream's stock is exactly where it's at. But Mark McKenzie and Miles Robinson took a step up the depth chart for center back. And I think it was, I think they're, of the two, I think Miles Robinson was the one that had the better camp of the two. 2 starts, and I think he held his own in both. And his play wasn't terrible. And again, just like the other MLSers on this roster, it's nice when you actually see these type of performances against quality opponents. And it kind of shows that he's capable of being a part of that back trio. And it was nice seeing it because again, with the center back core the way it is, the way that these center backs are that we have, I think we all recognize that 2 of the 3 spots were going to be filled. So who is going to be that third? And with Miles Robinson having those type of performances, it kind of leads you down that road of like, okay, well, Miles Robinson's stock went up, but what about Mark McKenzie? And that's the question, right? Did Mark McKenzie do enough? Were those performances that we saw when he came off the bench in the first one for Tim Ream, and then when he started in the second one, were those performances good enough to warrant yet another start in the November window? Right? Like, essentially what I'm asking is, like, was his performance good enough to replace Tim Ream? Because I think we all believe that in a back three, I think as far as I was concerned, it would be like Richards on the right, potentially Cameron Carter-Vickers in the center, and then Mark McKenzie on the left. Or if you want to play Ream, then you play him centrally, and then you have McKenzie on the left. But I don't know if Mark McKenzie did enough in this window, not necessarily not to get called back in, but the question is whether or not he did enough to actually put himself in consideration for a starting spot versus a guy like Miles Robinson, who was given a massive opportunity. And I think that, I think his play was better. If I'm calling it straight down the middle, I thought he had the better performances of the two. And I don't think, by the way, Cameron Carter-Vickers was brought into this camp and he did not see the field. And it is what it is. And lastly, Freeman and Arston in the wingback positions with also Timmy Weah. And I think Timmy Weah kind of vaulted himself over both Freeman and Arston when it comes to that first off the bench wingback position in case of an emergency type situation. So from that standpoint, good stock ups and good stock downs. That's going to do it for me. Make sure, by the way, you hit the like and subscribe buttons, and make sure you turn on your notification bell, because tomorrow, Adam Turner will be joining me tomorrow at 10 as we go ahead and get a little bit more into this international window, as we kind of lay it down and we kind of prepare you for the November window. So that is going to be fun. That's going to be at 10 o'clock Eastern tomorrow here on Stateside Footy. So make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons and be ready for that tomorrow night. Until then, I want to thank you guys. Have a good night.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies.